Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Personne Extraordinaire. Through this interview series, I am attempting to profile people who've made an extraordinary impact in their respective fields to engage and uplift others and help them be the best versions of themselves. I am humbled and honored today to introduce to you a person who is very committed to making a difference and bringing about a much needed change in the corporate space through her work in the field of diversity and inclusion, Bhavna Sarin. A passionate advocate of DEI, animal welfare, and mental health, Bhavna brings about 7 years of diverse experience in the industry she has worked with, in staffing, IT, media, and consulting, as well as the role she has played. She kickstarted her career as a recruiter with a search firm and then played a variety of roles in the HR domain before taking on the role of a content writer in the HR space. It was during her time as a researcher and writer where she found her true calling, diversity and inclusion. Outside of work, Bhavna is all about loving dogs. Her now angel baby Kairo is who inspired her to play a more active role in taking care of homeless furry beings. Her daily struggle is choosing between food and fitness, and she hopes to commit to the latter soon. Welcome, Bhavna. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Zain. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. To start with, what is a fun fact about yourself? This can be a favorite animal, food, hobby, or anything else.
Well, if I was to talk about a fun fact, I think that would be my absolute transformation from being someone who would, change the direction in which I was walking just at the sight of a dog at a distance to today petting every dog I can on my way wherever I'm going, waving, saying hi to them, and I think that's been an absolute transformation. And today I've built this unbreakable bond with them. And I really feel dogs are, the purest souls and the most loving species. I mean, I love all animals, but I think I'm going to be biased towards dogs. I was actually fortunate enough to have been blessed with a wonderful dog. His name is Kairo. Our time together was far shorter than what I was prepared for, but in that very little time, he's actually made a lifelong impact on me. And as a result, I found so much love around me, in the area that I stay in. And there's so many dogs here that, my mother and I actually feed every day now. And just the immense love that they, give back and without expecting anything in return, really. It's just wonderful how dogs are. And, it's really nice to see that beyond the people who actually bring dogs home, there are so many people out there who actually, volunteer and take care of dogs, of animals in overall. And, I mean, how we generally refer to them as animal rescuers. They go beyond just, passing on a smile or just petting a dog. They rescue dogs. They provide them with, much needed medical care. They feed them. They help with the transport wherever needed. So it's really nice that a lot of people take out that time. And I've seen people who are, like I've seen an 18-year-old girl do, engage in this, and a 70-year-old plus woman. And these are all different and very diverse people from very different walks of life. The students, the people who run their own foundations, they're working professionals in the corporate space, homemakers. So it's a whole wide world out there. And, I'm really grateful for their existence, and they've all together inspired me to actually do a lot more. So thank you to all of them. And I'm sure this is a long answer for a fun fact, but just bring dogs around you and there'll be lots of fun is all I'm going to say.
That's actually a very interesting comment, Bhavna ma'am. And if I may say so, your passion for dogs is actually a double blessing, as you and your larger village are not only helping innocent, voiceless beings, but in turn are getting healed in return because they're so selfless and cuddly. I have a dog of my own, but that's a story for another day. So, my next question to you is, I'll just start with a comment. It's really rare that career paths follow a straight line from where they began to where they are now. Could you please share a little bit about your own journey? Who or what was your inspiration, and some interesting experiences along the way that shaped you as a person?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question, Zehin. It has truly been a journey, is all I can say. And it wasn't one that I was, prepared to embark on. I even had the slightest of idea when I was still in my younger years, like I can say now. Until a few years ago, it wasn't really, something that one would think about stepping away from a, traditional career path. You were to decide what you're going to take in your 11th and 12th, decide, a course that you would want to pursue in your graduation, and then decide whether you want to work or pursue higher studies. So that's what the general conditioning is, right? In my case, I had always been someone growing up who was not very clear on what career path I wanted to take. But I think for me, what worked well initially was the method of elimination. I'd always known which direction I did not want to go in. And that helped me, be very selective of how I'm approaching my professional journey. But like I said, it's now that I can say this. A couple years ago, that wasn't really the situation. It is a risk today as well, to actually explore an untapped path, pursue a career or a profession outside of your educational background, or outside of even, different from your previous job. And I've spoken to multiple friends and colleagues across generations. And so given that, I come from I've done an MBA, and like I said, I've just spoken with a lot of people across generations, across companies, across sectors, and they all resonate with the horror of the placement season that is, that dawns upon all of us at the end of be it graduation or even post graduation, of course. And while the season brings opportunities for all, the sheer pressure of, getting into a top notch brand and, the pay scale, these two can bring as much disappointment really as they can bring about a life changing opportunity. And I wasn't always a staunch believer of, it'll happen when it's meant to happen. But over the years, I found myself to actually believe in that. Um, I'll just tell you a little about my journey, actually, how this started. So just 2 days before I was supposed to join my very first job, unfortunately, so my parents had actually come with me to settle me in this new city where I was supposed to start my first role. We unfortunately met with an accident. And the condition of my parents' health at that point in time, it just made me, and they were supposed to come back after settling me. So just looking at, what that incident had done to their health, I could not even comprehend, I mean, I could not even think about not being with them at that point in time where I was really required to be. And against the, advice of my close friends, mentors, I really actually, went ahead with not taking up that job, which was the very first job of my professional journey. And not a lot of people, like I said, felt that was the right choice, but I went ahead with it anyway because for me it was a no-brainer. A couple months later, once they felt better, I took on my first role as a recruiter. Um, and like I said about the process of elimination, while I did take on that role, I did have this, inkling since a while, like a couple months from before that I really had this growing interest in psychology. And so I actually quit that job to pursue higher studies in psychology this time. But as destiny had planned for me, I did not clear the entrance. In the meantime, before I took on another job, I started a blog of my own because I'd always been fond of writing, but I never really acted upon it. So I started writing this blog, which had a lot to do with human behavior, emotions, how people interact. And I think, like I said, I think that's today it's diversity and inclusion, where I think that's where, the seed was sown possibly. So I would write about that. And a couple months later, again, I had to, find my next job. I found another brilliant organization, wonderful leaders that I worked with. I got to perform a diversity of roles in this organization. But then came a time after a reasonable time with them, my health I wasn't really doing well health wise. And I had to again make this decision to, push through or you take a break. And I've really realized that, being in the corporate space, having, when you go for further studies, and, there's this entire conditioning that you come up with there about the importance of having a job, which, of course, not discounting the importance of financial independence and stability, and, of course, a job in your career growth. But, there are moments where you realize that you can either push through right now, or you really need to just take a step back, prioritize, not because a job is not important, because at that point in time there is something else in your life that is calling your attention. And that is what it was for me. And I made that choice. I took some time off from work. This was a longer break. And in this time, what I did was freelancing for a bit, too, because it's always been a important factor for me to be financially independent. which is why these breaks also, were a tough choice for me, because I knew what, the choices I was making versus what I'd always prioritized in my life. And so I started freelancing to be financially independent, still, make my pocket money, as I can say, at that point in time. A couple months down the line, I actually found this interesting writing course, and I pursued that, took it up, and I had no idea going into that course what my next step is going to be. I was just doing it because that was something I'd been passionate about, and I thought it would be, productive use of time, the uh, since I had the time back then. I did this course, and before it got over, I got another opportunity with the firm, and this was as a content writer. And this was a perfect marriage of my educational background, my skills, and my interests, because this was content writing for the HR space that I had a background in and understanding in. And that really helped because I had not professionally written before. Freelancing was one aspect, but writing professionally in this space was something completely different. A lot of support from the team around me, absolutely wonderful people, amazing people manager. And I think through my work in writing, when I started doing a lot of research, that's where I discovered diversity and inclusion, which had possibly been there for the longest time. But if I even go back to my masters, which was a couple years ago in HR, there was no concept of diversity and inclusion that we were introduced to. So this is a fairly new field, and that's what I discovered during my time as a writer. And I discovered this was actually my true calling, because it was something I clicked with, and instantly uh, it was just a connection that I think I can't explain uh, in words, really. I mean, I don't know how to really put it in words, but essentially, now talking about the entire linear career path. 7 years ago, if you had asked me this question, I had no idea how my career trajectory is going to chart out. um, I had no one in close quarters within the family in the in the corporate space as such. So my father was in the defense forces; he's retired now, and no one even in the close vicinity, who could guide me. And I actually consider that a blessing, because when you have someone to actually guide you and tell you, okay, this is the next step, this is the logical next step, it kind of confines your thinking, the scope that you would want to experiment with. And funnily enough, I'm a Libran, and Librans are known to be indecisive. But the one aspect of my life which I've actually been very certain about is my views about my professional life, and the decisions I've made. I've not regretted one decision, and I'm really grateful for all the support I've received throughout this time from my family, of course, but also from the organizations who've actually given someone with with breaks in their CV, someone who's not had what one would call a linear career trajectory, giving them the opportunity to actually learn, taking that chance, and actually steering away from that traditional uh, path, how people would progress in their careers, that if you've chosen a field, you have to stick with it. I mean, that's a choice, right? It's essentially a human choice. Some people are very clear. Some people back in school knew they're going to be cardiologists, and today they are cardiologists, versus someone who was still exploring, who wanted to find out what's out there in the world. I mean, how much can a 12th standard student really know about what would they want to pursue a career in? Some do know it, but the pace at which things are changing, the pace at which the industry is changing, within the last 7 years, it's changed so much. It's really important that we don't really confine ourselves to what someone else's idea of a career path is. I think that's my biggest learning. And uh, I think when your question about who inspired me, I so when I think of role models, there are countless people who have inspired me in my journey, but I don't think I can say I have one role model, because I aspire to create impact, make a difference, as I look up to people who are actually doing that. But I look at it as more as a learning equation than actually looking at them as a role model, because that's somewhere I think again goes back to that confinement, because we tend to follow in their footsteps. We tend to uh, just our thinking becomes a little limited, I feel. But again, to each their own. There are people who've had role models and they've just learned from them and grown tremendously. So again, the importance of human choice there. Lastly, bringing this very long answer to a close, our words hold immense power, more than we can possibly imagine. They are truly the make or break elements for us and for those around us. A few words of encouragement can actually empower someone just when they need it, helping them take that leap of faith. And such similar power is also held by words that convey a lack of trust in someone's abilities. And especially, for someone like I just shared about not having a linear career path, the kind of things, the conflicting views of people, it really did have an impact on me. But I learned early on that if I need to make these decisions for myself, I have to listen to their advice, listen to their advice, learn from that, and make my own decisions nonetheless. For example, now if someone talks to if someone suppose starts a business, they want to start a business, they want to just discuss with their family that, hey, I'm thinking of starting a business. And the first thing, someone who a well intentioned loved one tells them, oh, it's not easy to do this. Why do we say such things? I don't understand that. I mean, everyone knows it's not easy to run a business, it's not easy to do anything. But instead of telling people, instead of becoming in a way prescriptive about, okay, don't do this is too difficult, encourage them, ask them questions, be curious. And I would suggest enable people, let them come to their own decisions. Don't be prescriptive, don't tell people that, okay, this is easy to do, this is not easy to do. So just be more conscious of how you express your concerns. We're all humans, and no matter how good our intentions are, we're still meant to falter. So, which is why I hold this quote from the movie The Pursuit of Happiness very close to my heart. The father in the movie, played by Will Smith, he tells his son this very important quote. Um, don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something, not even me. You've got a dream, you've got to protect it. People can't do something themselves, they'll tell you you can't do it either. So if you want something, go get it, period. It's as simple as that when it comes to making your professional choices, because you're the one sitting in and day out doing that work. So make sure you listen to yourself. Listen to all that people say, but do what your gut tells you, because you won't go wrong. It might take longer than you thought. It doesn't all work overnight. There is no overnight success. And this wait might make you question, they'll make you question your choices. Was I right to follow my heart or my gut? Was I being impulsive? But I suggest wait it out. It's all part of the process. Just wait it out and you'll know you made the right call. And that will give you the conviction to actually believe in yourself and listen to yourself the next time you're in doubt. And like this popular quote again, I would suggest put this on, like just pin it up wherever you have your whiteboards or pin up boards, your goals. If your mind can conceive it and your heart can believe it, then you can achieve it. Period.
Wow, that's actually a very, very interesting story and a very inspiring story for teenagers like me. I love that you had the guts to follow your heart and defy the prevalent conventional wisdom and prescribed path, and you finally found your true calling. That's so inspirational, mom. Um, so for my next question, firstly, I'd like to thank you for having gone through my audiobook, Extraordinaire, and I do hope you enjoyed it. In my eponymous poem, L'Extraordinaire, and several others, I've dwelt on how empathy is a superpower the world needs most today, and how kindness is the panacea for many problems we face today. What do you feel about these two virtues, empathy and kindness?
Before I share my thoughts on empathy and kindness, Zehen, I would really want to call out how beautifully you've chosen themes for your audiobook. Just the sheer diversity in that, from themes ranging from kindness heals, get up, speak up, sorry, get up, stand up, perspective to, sweet sibling rivalry, and the many other themes. I think among all, there's one that stood out for me in particular, where this mother is explaining to her children the importance of perspective through, a left hand, right hand experiment. And these are subtle things that we forget in daily life, but it was such a good reminder, So thank you so much for putting that all together. Um, Coming to kindness and empathy, I think these are basic elements of everyday life. And interestingly, while we hear about the importance of kindness from a very young age, it takes us years to actually truly imbibe it as a value, as a choice rather. And I feel being kind and empathetic is a conscious choice we make. We've heard the saying, if you have a choice to be kind and be right, be kind. But that is easier said than done. I mean, it all sounds great on paper, but when you're actually living your everyday life, it does. I'll tell you why it does come to becoming a choice, because no matter how hard you try to be kind, we are all human. We all run out of patience. And as you grow older, there are so many different experiences that you go through. There are so many different circumstances you go through. And these different emotions and circumstances, they make you feel things in a different way. And it also kind of impacts how you express what you're feeling, right? You won't always express what you're really feeling. It gets covered under a lot of other emotions that kind of overpower each other at some time. So the behavior in the end that we end up exhibiting towards someone else might not be kind, and it could be intentional, it could be unintentional as well. For example, now when someone is being rude to us, we have a tendency to think that they're rude in general. We feel a need to differentiate between this pertinent human need to distinguish between good, bad, positive, negative. It is very important to actually differentiate between our feelings about positive emotions, about negative emotions, from a self-awareness point of view. But this need to make it as good and bad, that's a concept I actually don't really I would, I mean, I feel very uncomfortable with that concept of uh compartmentalizing, or just distinguishing between emotions as good and bad. uh, because we try to nudge each other to steer away from the negative, right? But our circumstances won't always make us feel positive. We don't always feel great. We have good days, we have bad days. And just like we have good days and bad days, everyone else also goes through so many circumstances, and they might not always be on their best behavior. They might not always be in a positive mental space or be able to be kind or sweet, right? So just try to be understanding and be kind. But here, by no means here am I saying that, allow yourself to be taken for granted. You need to draw the line for yourself. You need to also let people know that their actions or behaviors or words are making you feel not good or making you uncomfortable. Communicate and listen more. It makes it easier to be kind when you know where this other person is coming from, what their experiences have been like, what their story is. But they can tell you that only if you're willing to listen. And this listening is such an important aspect of life, and it can take us our entire life to listen, to learn to listen. And I struggle with it honestly myself, because for instance, when any loved one used to walk up to me earlier and just share any struggle that they're going with, any difficult decision that they're contemplating, um, I used to feel bad that they're in a bad place right now, or they're in a confused space right now, and I had this urge to help them out. And my way of doing that earlier used to be by just offering a solution. Okay, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And it took a while to realize, okay, that is first of all a pattern that I'm exhibiting, and secondly, no one always wants a solution from you when they come to you. Sometimes being kind towards someone doesn't mean trying to help them come out of the problem they are in. It could also just mean just being with them in that space that they are in, just sitting with them in that, and letting them just come up with a solution themselves if they need to. And sometimes people don't need a solution, they just want to vent out, get something out of, release that energy out of their system, and they feel better instantly, right? So it's very important to learn this, to actually develop that skill of learning, of listening. And like I said, it takes a while, but stay at it. And of course, to your point on empathy being a superpower, it absolutely is. It can move mountains. Look at the diversity of issues the world currently is struggling with, you know, and see how empathy alone has created a sense of boundaryless community across the globe. People coming together for causes and fighting for a change, for something that might be happening even in another country, that something might not be impacting them directly, but speaking up. Where is that coming from? I mean, look at something, let's look at the LGBTIQ plus community, and their allies. It is one big community across the globe, and they're striving together to bring about constitutional and social change. But just think about what brought them together. I mean, of course, the community understands each other's pain. They know to an extent what they are likely going to be exposed to and what each other has been through. And, it's that shared understanding of what's happening is unfair. The pain they all feel together for each other. But also the allies, they see this pain. They can't really put themselves in their shoes, but they really realize that this is unfair. And, it is that empathy. And this is just one example. There are so many elements or so many things that happen in this world where you just need to open up your eyes and just look at what's happening, and just choose to be kind. It And just coming back to choosing to be kind and choosing to be empathetic, because that is a choice you'll make it every single time. You can choose to see differences that as something that creates a divide, but you can also choose to see it as a value add, as something that complements the usual versus resorting to exclusion. I think empathy truly is a superpower, and that's something we must all constantly practice.
Thank you so much for your kind words, and I completely endorse your views on the power of empathy and how it can move mountains. Um, so you're a very passionate DEI practitioner, and I've personally witnessed that ableism and social and structural issues like lack of accessibility continue to present barriers for people with disabilities around the world. What in your what in your opinion is the best way to tackle these issues, and how do you manage to make inclusivity the cornerstone of all that you create in different organizations that you have worked at?
So, Zahan, I honestly don't think there is one solution or one best way to tackle structural issues in organizations, because every organization has their unique DNA, unique goals, culture, leadership, and all these elements, among others, they're crucial pillars of how successfully an organization is actually able to adopt what we call an inclusive mindset. And this inclusive mindset, how it comes out is through their policies, through their practices, through their behaviors. Now, during my time as a content writer, I did extensive research on multiple D&I themes across segments that, today we know them as gender, pride, people with disabilities, military veterans, um, ethnic diversity, and so on and so forth, right? And we club it all under the umbrella diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, one common theme among organizations enabling authentic and sustainable inclusion was drawing a clear distinction between CSR and CSR efforts and DEI. CSR, as we know it, is corporate social responsibility, which essentially boils down to, making it as a good thing to do versus a business imperative. Now, the common theme, like I said, I mean, there was a common language across organizations, but everyone did things in their own certain way because they realized that DNI is very much a business imperative, and businesses that do not see this, they're still incurring losses that they can actually very much avoid by making DEI a priority, because it impacts not just their culture, but their bottom lines as well as customer experience, given how aware people are in the current times and the kind of demands they actually have from the brands they associate themselves with. And in fact, every leader that I interviewed in this space, Zahin, across sectors, varying company sizes, they all spoke a common language. But coming back to your original question on, this, how to address the best solution to tackle those structural issues, they spoke a common language, but their approach to DNI was very unique to the problem their organization was facing. And it has to do with the maturity of an organization, because DEI is a journey in itself, right? And why I say it's the maturity of an organization, because everyone has a different struggle that they're dealing with. For some people, they're dealing with something as, something about representation, about, for instance, gender representation. For some people, the struggle is about, increasing the number of women in their organization. For another organization, maybe they've got this aspect taken care of, but their struggle is with retaining the women or the other diverse communities that they've hired, retaining them and growing them, ensuring their career progresses within the organization. For another organization, maybe it is neither of these two, it is more to do with policies. They want to institute inclusive policies before they can actually start hiring and onboarding diverse talent to actually create that ecosystem. So it's every organization has their own struggle. There are different points in this DEI journey, and which is why there cannot be one common approach. So what's essential, I would say, nonetheless, is to have leadership commitment, realistic and attainable diversity goals, which is very crucial, because without those goals, you're not going anywhere. And to actually bring those goals to life, you need to have dedicated human and financial capital investment. Like I said, and that is where we do have dedicated human and financial capital investment in CSR efforts also, but to recognize that CSR and DEI are something very separate. And yeah.
That's a very insightful answer, Bhavna ma'am. I appreciate the clarity you provide on how CSR and DEI are two distinct topics, with DEI being a business imperative that links directly to business growth over time. Finally, could you please share some parting pearls of wisdom with our listeners on how we can make this world a kinder, more inclusive place to live in?
Sure. I think if I could give one advice on how to make the world a kinder, more inclusive place to live, I would say start with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself about your uniqueness or for not having what someone else showcases they have, given the times we live in today. In your audiobooks, Zahan, you've highlighted a couple times how differentness is a superpower. And I'd advise everyone to hold on to the superpower that they have, not struggle to fit into, the confines that surface from time to time across different phases of their life. And why I emphasize this is because in the current times, that the times we live in today, we very frequently fall into the trap of comparison, and not just about comparing what we have, what someone else has and we don't, but also about the way we look at the world outside and the way we judge people outside. We have this very strong and powerful tool, which is social media, but unfortunately it doesn't always serve the purpose that it can be leveraged for, to bring about meaningful change, to actually share, to actually communicate, to educate. There it is being used for that purpose as well, but more often than not, it has a more negative influence on the way we think, the way we look at ourselves, and the way we look at the outside world. And one very crucial element that is actually, I would, it's been there for the longest time, but the spotlight on this aspect of life has been so much more in recent years, which is mental health. I would suggest please prioritize self-care and share your journey when you can, because a couple years ago, Zehen, I did not know what is really going on in my friends' minds, right? What the worries, the anxieties. We would all often, like I said, earlier, about the good and bad emotions, the positive and negative emotions, outlook towards life. It could be very transactional, and we didn't realize it back then. But today, when I talk to people, it's not just about the goals they have, but how they're feeling. Their mental health is a priority. And so many people now that I speak with have actually taken action to, prioritize mental health, and they talk about it, they seek therapy. And it's a different thing for everyone else. For some people, it's therapy. For some people who require greater support, they seek medication from certified doctors and psychologists, and they basically get a consult, which is the most basic thing to do today, right? So when it comes to being kind, I would suggest start with yourself, understand yourself more, be more self-aware, and prioritize mental health. If you do that, I think you can, that makes that choice of being kind will be way more easier to come for you. So I would just suggest that you will always have a choice to make in life. Make one that moves towards growth, enablement, and empowerment.
Thank you so, so much, Bhavna, ma'am. This is so enlightening and uplifting in equal measures. I look forward to partnering with you to do my part in spreading the sunshine on this very, very important topic. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Zain, for having me.